Hi, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Audible, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good evening, Swar. I'm here.
Good evening, ma'am. Welcome.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes. Good evening, sir. Good evening, Sagar.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, sir.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to one and all to this series of webinars organized by V School on the basis of the National Education Policy 2020. I'd like to begin with a simple reflection of mine. As a kid, me, like most of you, would have learned a nursery rhyme. Rain, rain, go away, come again another day, little Johnny wants to play. I'm sure most of you remember this even now. A few years after I learned this, I realized that India is a country which is dependent on the monsoon. So why rain, rain, go away? And that's when I began to appreciate some of the nursery rhymes that I learned at home in our own languages. One of them being, for example, I learned in Gujarati, Aure varsad, dhebaryo parsad, unni unni rotli ne karela nu shak, which means we are calling for the rain to come and bless us. And at that time, we children will enjoy hot rotis with the bitter gourd sabzi. Or in Marathi, we learned, Yere yere pausa tula deto paisa. I'm sure you've got the point I'm trying to make. And the point is that what we learn should be on the basis of the context that we live in, the place we live in, the situation that we grow up in, and the situation in which we operate. And that's why I think it's so very relevant to discuss about the Indian thought system, the Indian leadership, the thought leadership, our history, our language, our culture, our art, because in that we can find solutions for life, in that we can find greater fulfillment. Of course, we don't mean or we don't suggest that we copy paste tradition blindly, but all that we are suggesting is that can we explore into the depths of what we have in terms of the wisdom that our country has to offer? Can we explore that at every age, every stage? And we're talking about also bringing it into the education system, into our lives and into our thought process. So on that note, I would like to hand over to Professor Malavika Nagarkar and to take this discussion forward. But before that, I'd briefly like to introduce ma'am. Professor Malavika Nagarkar is a faculty member at V School. Her expertise is in communication skills and interpersonal skills, which she has been teaching and training to college students at management institutions, as well as to corporate professionals. She has an MA in English Literature from Mumbai University and an MA in Applied Linguistics from the University of Essex, United Kingdom. Her other interests include history, theatre, films, reading, music. To me personally, ma'am is someone who is a symbol of humility more than anything else. So over to Professor Malavika Nagarkar. Ma'am, can you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry. I thought it might disturb, so I had muted myself for a while. Okay. Good evening to everyone who's present this evening. And I'd like to begin by thanking Swar for her very generous introduction. And I know we have all heard the session on this subject in the morning, and we have imbibed a lot of it, thought about it. So let's see what I'm able to do with it and take it forward. Because when I heard the webinar in the morning, I said, now is the challenge for me. Because what am I going to now talk? Because everything has been said. So hopefully I will not repeat. I will not say the same things, but maybe I would like to give something that, or discuss something that will allow us to discuss and give food for thought. I would like to just begin with my PowerPoint, if it behaves itself. I always have my doubts about how the PowerPoint will work. Just a minute. Just a minute. Yes, just a minute. Can it be seen by everyone?
Not yet.
I don't know what else I have to do. Let me see if I can do something more. I've clicked here on share.
Have you opened the PPT first?
I have opened the PPT.
Okay. Then when you share it, then you'll get 3-4 windows. One of them will have that PPT.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to do. But when I'm clicking on share, all that's happening is that it's getting larger in size. I think I'll ask Ajay to start it.
Madam, Santosh.
Hello. Ajay, suru kara tum PPT. Hello. Thank you. That's why I had kept him with me to share if necessary. Although I prefer to work it on my own. Anyway, doesn't matter. Now, why have I lost all of you?
You can stop sharing from your side.
Yes, I have tried to stop sharing, sir. But it's still there. Video. Just a minute. हॅलो अजय आता एक पीपीटी दिसते पण ही तुमची आहे का माझी आहे मला माहित नाही बरं बरं ठीक आहे ओके हो आहे थँक्यू Is the PPT visible now to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
It is? Okay, fine. All right. Now we were talking about the national education policy, Indian knowledge system, languages, arts, and culture. We need to, can we go to the next slide, Ajay? Yes. I've just got a question here with these names. What do they have in common? Rabindranath Tagore, Madame Montessori, Leela Patil, Baba Amte, Bankar Roy, and then the list continues, but I have not continued with the list. But we are going to look at all these. Can we just go to the next slide, please? We'll have this slide again later. They were all educators. That's what I have called them. Our beacons of light to understand our roles as teachers and administrators and as human beings. Next slide, please. And this is what the NEP 2020 is in brief. Promotion of Indian languages. Next slide, please. Multilingual education with a 4-year B.Ed program, etc., etc. Translation, interpretation. Then the Sanskrit language also coming into the mainstream of the curriculum. Next slide, please. Arts and culture. Initiative to promote arts and culture. Can we just see the next slide? Yes. Impact of NEP, promotion of Indian languages, etc. Artists, and we can have artists in residence. That is, more people will get work. Courses on Indian indigenous knowledge systems can be conducted. Student tours under Ek Bharat, Shreshta Bharat. We can provide vocational education from the early ages, and we can push research and innovative thinking. What we are talking about is, and of course, after this, don't move the slides, please. This is the last one I want to show, then we'll move to the others. Providing more and varied job opportunities, encouraging entrepreneurs into new areas, creating people with sound values and an understanding of humanity, and making people others-centered. I think when we look at the educational program, the new one, this is what we understand. This is the intention or the objective. I don't want to use the word intention because we know where intentions take us. The objective of the NEP 2020, which has just completed 1 year. Are we then trying to say that everything that you and I studied and everything, the system that we went through was worthless? No. Changes are required. Modifications are required. Rethinking is required because very often things fall into a routine and they stagnate. Can I just have the next slide, please? Just leave it at this. Now, when we look at all these people, before we go on, yes, at one time, all of you must be aware that in the school education, value education was added as a subject. what was the intention of the person from Pune, Mr. Vasantrao Desai, when he recommended this? And what happened to it is what we have to think about. His idea was, let this be reflected, the values, the way the students should be reflected in that is, the teachers should themselves behave in a value-based manner. They should be the role models. And as we go ahead, going to say, parents and teachers become the role models. And through their behavior, through the way they are honest, they are ethical, they are sincere in what they do, they are able to convey the same values to the children. And through the syllabus, there are so many opportunities to convey this to the students. The teachers must make that effort. Unfortunately, what happened to this value education was a 20-minute session at the beginning of the day where something was learned by rote. Sometimes students were told, okay, draw the flag, color it, and it ended. And finally, the whole idea of value education in the education system got wiped out. We are talking today, and rightly so, of vocational training. I remember there was work experience, not going out and working, but right from the 8th or 9th standard, students were given subjects that would allow them to learn to possibly even start their own trade, start their own little businesses. Some could opt, everybody need not go compulsorily into higher education. So the idea was, start with some training that would allow them after the 10th to get into business, do what they want. Others could continue to the 12th and then opt out. And only those who really want to go in for higher education can go in. Why are we compulsorily pushing everybody there? And I think what the NEP now is saying about flexibility, holistic learning, I'm extremely grateful to Professor Ravi Vaidi for briefing everyone about it yesterday, because it's taken away from my responsibility to share all that. Liberal education, holistic education, education that will encourage the different talents of these people. And so many attempts were made. I'm coming to Tagore, but before that, the whole Montessori method of teaching young children, what did it say? And we still call it the Montessori class, but children are made to write repeatedly, memorize, they have to be able to read. And then we say, if children write at a very early age, it can affect their minds. This is what is happening. Leela Patil, the lady who has started an experimental school and has been running it in Kolhapur for the past so many years, where children learn by doing. And when she was asked, what about the school after you? She said, well, if it has to continue, it will. Otherwise, I have done my share for some generations, to help some generations to enjoy their learning process. Now, you'll wonder where Baba Amte comes into this. All of you know, he was a renowned lawyer. Some of you may be knowing that he was very fond of both Indian films and Hollywood films. And he used to write fan mail to the various actors and actresses. And he used to write under the pseudonym Milind. From that craze for films and his own profession, something changed him. And what was inside him came to the fore. And the rest is all history. We know how he changed.
Uma, I try to do this. You know what? You have to use your own brain, because the color on that and this is not matching.
Ravi Vaidi, sir, I can hear you. Please, could you please mute? Thank you. And he was part of everything else, and yet he changed. He became a name. His children have taken after him. You name it, and there are so many. Bankar Roy, I think his original name is Sanjeet, if I'm not mistaken, studied at Doon School, post-graduated from St. Stephen's College, Delhi. Mother was Trade Commissioner to Russia. In 1965, he went with other college students from Delhi University to Bihar, where there was a terrible famine. Saw all death, dying, hunger. Returned to Delhi a changed man. He returned and told his mother that he wanted to spend his life working and living and working in a village for the people. And as he has put it in his own talk, mother went into a coma when she heard this, because they were eyeing the Indian Foreign Service for him with his brilliant career in education. And for 3 years consecutively, he was national champion of squash. But all of us know about his barefoot college in the small village of Purulia in Rajasthan, and all the work he has done for solar lighting, not only in India, but in Afghanistan and Africa, some of the countries in Africa. Why am I saying all this? We have to allow our learners to express themselves. They have to be able to live their lives according to their inclinations, their talents, and parents and teachers are the closest observers of this. This is one aspect. Let's come to the first name here of Tagore. Tagore was one of the younger siblings, and he would feel very bad that his elder brothers had already started going to school and he was still at home. So his father, Maharishi Devendranath Tagore, decided to send him to school. Tagore, the little boy, would return home, and very often, with a foot ruler in his hand, he would spend his time hitting the railings of the balcony of their home, Thakurbadi, in Kolkata. He was not interested in going to school. He realized there's nothing much, and all that the teachers did was to beat the boys. So his father decided, this child of mine is not for school education, to go there and study. The father appointed teachers to teach him at home. And through this, he also allowed the son to go, and whenever they went away from the city, to wander among the open spaces. And therefore, we today have a poet of international acclaim among us meaning in India, a painter, a singer, a philosopher, whose father in those days recognized what his son wanted, how his son would grow, and he provided this. Father himself was rooted in ancient Indian thought, the Upanishads, the Vedas, and he not only read those, but thought about them, gave his interpretation, and was a prominent person in the Renaissance of the 19th century in India. And there, if that had not happened, what would have happened to Rabindranath Tagore? We don't know. But the father's farsight and insight have given us a Nobel laureate. What is it that we are trying to say? Of course, there is so much in our thought in India. And what is it that we can do? I know that one thought is, let us include ancient Indian thought into the syllabus. Let us include everything into the syllabus. If children want to learn music, part of the syllabus. Everything, if it becomes part of the syllabus, becomes rote learning. To a great extent, not always. I remember attending a lecture by a well-known historian, I forget his name now, where he talks about how the Ashokan edicts and inscriptions talk about a civil society long before John Locke told us about the civil society. Yes, Emperor Ashoka encouraged Buddhism. So many people accepted Buddhism, but Ashoka was aware that the society at large in India is multicultural, multi-religious, and his edicts on stone, even today, tell us that he had conveyed to his people the message that you must be polite with the others. Let not these differences come in the way. Let them understand that they have their way, you have your way, yet we can live as part of a common society. References to the past, this is what we can get from them. This is what, and this was a method of mass communication in those days. I remember telling this to a group of our media students. Today we talk of different ways of mass communication. This is how in those days, people, the emperors and the kings communicated. When we talk of mass communication, references to these will definitely help. This is what the past was. This is how they spread the message. If Chanakya talked and advised that there should be a spy system, of course, it was needed. There were no CCTV cameras in those days. And he had said, who should be the ones who will be observing everything? How is the king to know? How is the court to know what is happening? Why can we not include this as part of what we are talking? A historical perspective, looking at the past, helps us to understand the present that leads us to build a future. From those days to even later, when what in Marathi we call Davandi Pitna, there would be a man appointed to go ringing a bell and then announcing to the people what rules the king had made. Mass communication. And I remember in my childhood, large film posters would be on wheels pushed by a person going around the city advertising new films. The circus would be advertised like that, and sometimes there would be the circus joker with them. What is there to stop us from including this? When we talk of management and we talk of administration, I know all of you share these views with me. I am not here to advise anyone. But this is how we could include these. The different kinds, as I said, of administration methods. We have selected Chanakya as a management guru and only we have stuck to him. What about others? Our responsibility first to be enlightened on all this, to be aware of all this, and include it for our teachers, for our students. If we understand, even, this is apart from history, what about prehistoric man? How do we know anything about him? He has left paintings on the walls of the caves, and they tell us about his life. Monuments tell us so much. Different monuments, those which are sculpted so intrinsically, and some which are plain. They talk of different kinds of architecture. Let us take our students out to these places. At Ajanta and Ellora, the Kailash temple, which is not a living temple, was sculpted out of one rock, but started by the sculptors at the top. They started from the top and sculpted it all the way to its foundation. Amazing. What vision these artists must have had. And one mistake and everything goes wrong. What artists they were. Let us learn this. Let us first imbibe it to be able to share it as part of what we are talking. And let us learn to encourage the arts in our students. Today we are talking of a pandemic, and yet we are able to communicate now. What about during the times of Newton, when there was a plague? For a whole year, everybody was to stay at home. Newton was at Cambridge then studying. He also returned home. No online lectures, nothing, no going out. But his three greatest discoveries and inventions were from that period. Let our students, let them know this, how different times, this whole background helps us to appreciate the present of what we have today and how much others have worked to take us to this. Of course, the influenza that happened at the beginning of the 20th century is also there. What about the recession during 2008? All newspapers were going back to the recession in the 1930s, when America was badly affected by it. Between the two world wars, the whole world was affected, of course. Novels have been written on that. Films have been made on that. This is our responsibility, to connect to the past through the education that we are imparting, through what we are giving to them. I remember I was talking to a group of school children. Off and on, I go to just do English with them, especially before they start going to college. And there was a reference to the atlas, the collection of all the maps. And I asked them, I said, why is it called the atlas? Of course, they didn't know. Goes back to that image of Atlas carrying the whole earth on his shoulders. So since all the maps are there, I said, that's why it's called this. Why aren't teachers at different levels? Some of us do, some of us, especially at the school level, isn't all this included? That is what the NEP is asking us to do now. Not just have syllabi that will include. Let it be part of the syllabus also, some things. Yes. Multilingual education, so many things are there. What about when we talk of the knowledge systems? The freedom that the student and the learner had right from ancient times in our country to ask questions to the guru, to the teacher. It was not just the teacher talking to the learner. The curiosity of the learner was encouraged. The learner was motivated to ask questions. And it would be a dialogue. The learner was free to give his own views. If we go to Greece, Socrates and Plato, a dialogue. We have had similar things. Today, we are in a globalized world. What is here? Some things have happened there. But first, let us understand what is happening here. Young people, young children, young students, of course, mistakes are a part of learning. And that is what we have to make them understand. The freedom to interpret is part of our culture. Otherwise, we would not have a variety of commentaries on individual texts. One scholar interprets it in one way, another scholar interprets it in another way. We understand both. We may combine and find a third interpretation. With our thinking, nobody is to stop us. Yes, quite right about Tarka Shastra. And another aspect which I always notice in our own culture is, in brief, everything is conveyed. Two-liners, whether it is Panini's grammar, or it is Sushrut, or it is any of the other scholars. I call it cryptic, but it allows us to think. Through that, they convey. Let us learn to understand them. What is it that they want to say? We may not be able to read the originals, but there are translations. And if we are encouraging the teaching and learning of Sanskrit, some of them may even want at some stage to read the originals. We need to convey to our young people the real story behind all this. What is it that was happening? And what I'm trying to say in all this is that we have to allow children to freely express themselves. Let us understand them. Sometimes we understand young people too late. They have been forced to go one way, they have dropped out, and their life is a mess. Sometimes they find their own way out of it. I remember many years ago, one of our family friends, their son, a young person, young man, was dropping us home. And on the way, since we had met him for the first time, we asked him, "What are you doing?" With a very guilty expression, and not quite willing to speak, he said, "I'm learning the sitar." Obviously, being interested in music, we asked him, "Who are you learning from?" And his answer was, "From Annapurna Devi." And we were like, wow, Pandit Ravi Shankar's first wife, Annapurna Devi. He thought he should only tell us, because that is what will impress everyone, I'm doing this course, I'm doing this post-graduation, and now I'm going abroad or whatever. But that he had taken to music seriously and was actually accepted as a student, disciple by a teacher of Annapurna Devi's level was amazing. Let them do this. I remember we had a student at Wellinkar who was learning the tabla from Ustad Zakir Hussain. And in those days, I used to ask the students to make 5-minute presentations as part of communication skills on a subtopic entirely of their choice. And this boy spoke about the tabla. I forget his name now, but he was excellent with the tabla. I'm saying this not because only of his presentation, but because when he was a student at Wellinkar, we had a music program. I don't remember all the details. I don't know if...
Vimal.
Sorry?
Vimal Venkatraman.
No, he was not a South Indian. He was someone else.
Okay.
And at that same time, there was another boy who used to play the mrudangam. Maybe he was this person. And there was a music program where both of them accompanied the main singer or player. Not just that, but they gave us a performance also. This was an opportunity Wellinger gave them. Business management students, but you have the talent. A few years ago, we had an upcoming playback singer from the South who was our student, Srinivasan. He is back there into music again. We can't ask him, then why did you do your MBA? He enjoyed those 2 years. He was dedicated here and he's dedicated to what he's doing now. This is how I feel we are able to give learners something which is useful for them. Through history, understanding the administration of different rulers, understanding the changes that have happened. We can have small workshops introducing them to not full syllabi, but small workshops to related topics from history. So they can see the connect and they can see the changes that have happened. Let us introduce them to the sculptures. This is where I want to show you a sculpture in one of the later, I have just 3 or 4 sculptures there, which can be all related. As I mentioned earlier about the Ashokan Edicts, I have one of those also here in a little later. Why not give them a short, a few days, a few hours of training in the Brahmi script? The next time they go to a site, they might be able to decipher some of the letters and maybe even read a little. What a sense of satisfaction it gives a person. The variety of architecture across our country, right from the very intricate structures to the plain ones. And to go back to talking about administration and how certain kings ruled, certain times the administration was strong, then what led to its failure? Immediately the thought comes to me of the Peshwas. Peshwas, they ruled, but later on they fell because their administration slackened. If any question came to them, it's well known, and I think many of the Marathi speakers will know this. They came to the Peshwa with any issue. The answer was Udaik Bhojanottar, tomorrow after the morning meal. Management of empires cannot be done this way. From ruling over such a vast expanse of India, this is what they came to. And this is what we are trying to understand. Values, imbibe, I've spoken about them. But as I say, and I have said earlier, you and I, as teachers and parents, are the ones who are observed most closely, not just by very young children, but even by our management students. In the workplace, the senior management is observed closely by the juniors. And that is where the values of an organization are formed and inculcated in the younger. That is how in children, values are inculcated. And the first who should know all this are teachers and parents. Today, the education policy, the national education policy has given us everything on a platter. Whether it is flexibility in education, holistic education, whether it is vocational education, whether it is talking in terms of opportunities for jobs, opportunities for entrepreneurs, it is all there on the platter. Before I come to my conclusion. Can I just go to the next slide, please? Ajay, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. This is a sculpture from Kanheri. And the two camels that you see, it's a very old skull, actually 2000 years old. How many of us have noticed these double-humped camels? We do not have them in India here. How did people, sculptors 2000 years ago, know about such camels? This is because of trade from the Kabul region. There they have double-humped camels, and they brought all their products and whatever they wanted to sell on these camels. That is how, at a place like Kanheri near Borivali, the sculptors of those days saw them, and we have them here to see. What was the trade route? How did they come? What were the towns or cities for trade on this path? Where are those towns and cities now? Are they still big with trade? Or what has happened? Let our students find out. It's part of their learning. How many young people go to Kanheri to see the caves? There are about 110 of them. I have not been able to see all because some are difficult to climb to. But all that many people go there for is during the monsoons to play around in the water which is there. Let us take our students there. Let them see this. Let them understand. It doesn't have to be a detailed trip. The next slide, please. In one of the caves at Kanheri again, this is the painting on the ceiling in one of the caves. Just imagine the thought of painting on the ceiling. And the next slide, please. This is a painting by prehistoric man. Conveys so much. And the next slide, please. This is one of the Ashokan Edicts. I cannot read it, of course, but what we are saying is that on stone, it has stood the test of time. And this was a way of communicating with the masses in the empire, of making them understand how he wanted to govern his empire, what he expected from the people of his empire. Let them look at these. Let them understand these. Some of them may take to tourism as their profession. Let them. They may become brilliant guides in tourism. They might take an interest in conservation later on if they are into art. This is how we can encourage a variety of talent. Little competitions we do have. I'm very happy to say that all of us know that at Wellinger we do encourage all this. Their interest in music, their interest in dance, sports, their elocution, everything, the opportunities we give them to address audiences. It's all developing various talents. But today, this new policy should not freeze into nothing. Can I have the next slide, please? And what does all this mean? Administrators, managements, teachers, and parents must have the kind of understanding that is expected in the NEP 2020. That's one. Learners will then be encouraged to express their true inclinations, and genuine values as global citizens will be nurtured because they have their roots in their culture and appreciate the multicultural heritage of our country, which allows them to appreciate the global culture. Next slide, please. It also means the readiness to change according to local situations and changing times will keep the NEP 2020 alive and vibrant and not reduce it to a frozen, outdated system. What has happened with some of the earlier ideas in education, they've just stagnated. It is our responsibility of administrators at the higher level, managements, teachers, parents, to ensure that we encourage all this in the learners in the truest sense. One point that I want to make here, especially with reference to Sanskrit before I conclude. Fine. I remember that when I was studying in Delhi, up to the 8th standard, Sanskrit was compulsory in all the college schools. I also remember appearing for a special exam in Sanskrit then. And later on, some years ago, at the University of Mumbai, they have, in the Sanskrit department, they have a 1-year certificate course over the weekends. I remember doing that. But maybe our students don't have to go through only the grammar of Sanskrit. There are so many what we call subhashitas, 2-liners that tell you something about life, living, so many things. And I remember the first subhashit that I learned, and that was which I remember, is from the Sanskrit certificate days, which we keep telling our students in different ways. Udyamena hi siddhanti karyani na manorathaihi nahi suktasya simhasya pravishyanti mukhe mrugaha. Unless you have done hard work, you cannot achieve anything. It's only with work that you will achieve, not just nahi manorathaihi, not just with intentions. And the next line does not say just as, but immediately says, just as a deer, that is an animal, will not walk into the mouth of a sleeping lion. Message conveyed. Maybe we begin by quoting some excellent books on Subhashitas with translations. We can add them to our libraries. We can once in a way use some which are appropriate in situations and help them to develop an interest in the language and other languages as well. That is how they will learn to respect the variety and not ridicule people from other parts of our country. This is how they will learn to respect the multicultural environment we have, the multilingual environment we have. And once they are rooted here, they have a long way to go and they can become global citizens. Can I have the next slide, please? This first sentence, the aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together, is part of the 4-minute speech in the last part of Charlie Chaplin's film, The Great Dictator. Today, from the aeroplane and the radio, we have come much further. And so I have said here, today the internet and the mobile have interconnected us even more closely. And so we require people well rooted in their culture who can appreciate their place in the global context to become citizens of this world. Last slide, please. And therefore, let us recognize that the National Education Policy 2020, which has completed 1 year, is an important step in this direction. And it is our responsibility to implement it suitably, maybe later on making modifications that we may need to make with the changing times. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and we could go ahead with any discussion, and your ideas are most welcome, of course.
Do we have any questions or any comments?
Hi, Swar, and good evening, Malavika ma'am. This is Ragini.
Good evening, Ragini. Yes.
Yeah. First of all, wonderful session that you took. It was really an eye-opener. I loved the blend of your background relevant to today's topic. The piece of art reflecting in the background.
Oh, thank you.
That itself can become, if we have our background screens, blurs and images, and also that becomes a potential opportunity. Why not use Indian culture as a background
Okay, thank you.
on all the virtual platforms? My question, in fact, I posted a suggestion, ma'am.
Yes.
I don't know, people may use it, may not use it. It's about making art, culture, and multilingual features, characteristics more inclusive. So how can we include them maybe through our pitches, our competitions, our PPTs? You know, even if we dedicate one image, like you remember the banking industry has Hindi Shabd of the day.
Yes.
So something like that. And if each of us could include one of those, including the students, I mean, imagine over a year, there'll be a huge exposure to culture and art.
Of course. As you said, one word, maybe we ask that same word, we ask others to write it in their own language. Tell us what the word is for the same thing in their language. And given the number of languages in India, we will have a windfall.
True, true.
I've tried this in a school, not just words. I suggested to them that for that week, some sentences, and we can't try it at our level, but in school, it was interesting. Just simple things like, may I come in? Thank you. Good morning. 1 week. And, simple things like, can I drink some water now? 1 week, all these sentences are given to them in English. They have to use only English, all the teachers, students, when they talk to each other. Next week, all such sentences, simple things, give them the Hindi, and they should be even jotted down, put down in the class, so people can refer to it, so they develop speaking Hindi. Then maybe Marathi. And that time, this school had Sanskrit also. So I said, 1 week, these basic sentences only in Sanskrit.
Yeah. So I would like to again add to it. In fact, if you see our arts and weaves, like yes. I'm just so enthralled by the background. I can connect to so many topics. You see the sari designs earlier, the fabric designs earlier were very traditional. But now, because they wanted the youth to start wearing and there was a demand from the European markets, the designing has changed. Correct. So you could actually introduce just this one piece of design and you can connect it with a design subject, you can connect it with a costing, you can connect it with marketing and planning, production, everything. Yes. So like everything can be taken by one piece of art and culture itself.
Very true. I mean, one thing can lead to so many, a subject you're teaching can lead to so many other areas. I mean, and when you're talking of the medical science, what about the ancient medical science of India? Was there anything similar in other countries? Maybe at a later stage. Let them compare also. Not to say, oh, we were there 5,000 years ago and you were only 4,000. No, that whole approach has to go now.
Yes, true, ma'am.
Things are different. I mean, ultimately, we are all human beings. Culturally, socially, historically, there are reasons why we are different. And even biologically, in different parts, the complexions are different, hair is different, heights are different, but these are all superficial. And ultimately, we are all the same. This is how they will be able to appreciate our own culture and be able to see it in the context of the global situation. Thank you so much, Ragini, ma'am, for your adding to it.
Ma'am, I can relate to it more from the BD point of view, because when business design was started, we used to talk about design thinking, and of course Anand is there. He's an expert to talk about it, but I used to always say that there are so many different aspects that you need to sensitize yourself, because be it right from sketching, which Nadkarni sir used to teach, right from all of that to every aspect of aesthetics in a sense, whether it's
Yes.
color or form or shape. So I think designers are trained in that way. I think what I heard just now from you is maybe even richer than that. And they also say, for example, take inspiration from nature,
Yes.
take inspiration from our, like you said, sculpture and things like that. So I think these are very, if you are sensitized to it, then somewhere you tend to connect the dots,
That's right.
because you have
It's
been
this,
exposed to it at some point of time.
exactly. It is this sensitizing that is
Correct.
what
correct.
we have to do. And since we were talking about, the talents of the young people, so many resumes that I have been discussing with the students, they are all so much into social work. They're doing so much connected with NGOs, etc., but they don't realize its value till we tell them, look, this means you have a concern for society. Then they understand that that's a new dimension to their personalities. And I think this is what we need to encourage. That is what all of you are saying. Yes. Who has put this up?
Yes, so I thought that before we conclude,
Yes.
I had written a few things. This was in 2019, and a set of 4 poems.
Mhm.
And I thought that it's very relevant to today's subject. So if we can conclude with this, we can do a reading, and that's why I've shared this.
Okay, so just give me a minute before that, because I don't want to spoil this conclusion. I would
Yes.
just like to thank all those who have been here this evening and for your sending on the chat messages, appreciating whatever little I was able to give. That is motivating for me. Thank you.
So
Yes.
thank you, ma'am. And before we proceed to this reading, we, on behalf of V School, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. We saw in the comments, everyone has appreciated not just your content, but also the passion with which you speak. And I think this comes from within. And the authority comes not just from the experience, not just from the expertise, but from truly living these values. You talked about values, we talked about a lot of other people, right from Tagore to Bankar Roy and many others. You yourself are living it. While we see that one side of communication skills, there is the other aspect of you, especially in the social sector, the work that you do. I think it all reflects in the presentation. So thank you so much. To conclude, these are a set of 4 poems that I had jotted down in 2019. I've consciously not titled them. Some of my colleagues and friends in V School have read these, but I thought that it's very apt for the situation. And so I'd like to run you all through this. And these are 4 poems in 4 different languages. They are not translations of each other, but they are a series of 4 poems, which have to go one after the other. So here we go. रेखाओं से बंधी आकारों में रची हर आवाज को छूती हर अनुभूति को व्यक्त करती किसी में बाय से पेश होती कहीं दाय से सचती हर उच्चारण के समुच्चय में वो गहराई को बूंदती वो इंसान की सर्जनशीलता का सर्वश्रेष्ठ रूप उसकी प्रज्ञता का विशाल प्रतिरूप वो भाषा. So what I'm trying to say here that it is made up of lines and curves, somewhere written leftward and somewhere right, and it encompasses all human sounds and can convey the depth of all human feelings. I'm referring to language, which in my opinion is the greatest form of man's creativity. I move on to the next one, and this verse is in Gujarati. Tute sutar je sandhe mara purvajo mane mara balakne. તું તે સ્થાનિક જ્ઞાન વિદ્વતા અને સંપત્તિ તું તે દ્વાર જે જોડે મને દુનિયાને તું વધારે મિત્રતા તું લાવે મમત્વ તને બોલવું ભણવું શીખવું પોષવું તું સાધન સાતત્ય સામર્થ્ય તું અભિવ્યક્તિ તું અનહદ તું છે bhasha. Here I'm trying to say that the mother tongue is the biggest thread of human race with its forefathers and is a storehouse of local knowledge and wisdom. Other languages help us build connections with the world. All languages call for being spoken, studied, taught, nurtured. They are our resource, our continuity, and our strength. They are our expression. They are boundless. The next one is in English. Language can give identity, so we can also be identity, multicultural or neutral. How wonderful it would be. Language is free and it need to be. In no cage of nationalism, all embracing we would be. Language is a collective, its survival can only be preserved by you and me for a future that should be. Language opens opportunities, multilingual is the way to be, improves cognitive abilities, so much fun to be. Ain't it brilliant diversity? Celebration it needs to be. Why homogenize? Let all of us just be. Languages have evolved and are playful, and so needs to be our attitude to them. It is our duty to preserve them without letting the cause get dangerously colored by some sort of regionalism or nationalism. Being multilingual has a strong case in it as it expands our cognitive abilities and our social skills. It would be a wonderful world where diversity will flourish, where one language is not sacrificed for another, and we can create a fearless, secure, and free environment for people by ourselves being multicultural or simply neutral and non-threatening. And the last one I have written in Marathi. डोळे स्मित अश्रू हास्य एवढे बोलून गेले, सुख दुःखात मदतीचा हात एवढे सांगून गेले. ढंपू चप्पू बब्बू लिप्पा ह्यांनी त्वरित नाते जुळले. छोट्या सरप्राइजेस व स्वीट नथिंग्स आठवणी ठेवून गेले. नृत्य आणि नाट्य प्रेरणा देत राहिले. एक सूर एक तालानी मनाचे पूल जोडले. भाषेच्या पलीकडे खूप काही मिळाले. हृदयाच्या संवादात जग एक झाले. The eyes, the smile, the tears, the laughter, the helping hand in joy or sorrow, the cute gibberish baby pet names, the surprises and sweet nothings, all make language irrelevant. Music, dance, drama, ek sur ek taal have built potent bridges. The language of the heart in which the world unites never needs a language.
Beautiful.
Thank
Beautifully
you so much.
expressed. Thank you so much, Swar, for giving this whole session such a wonderful conclusion.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Have a good evening. Namaste.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.